Hello, welcome to Ms. Peepers Reading Corner. I'm Katrina, aka Ms. Peepers. Let's talk about books. Do you have too many books to read? Do you find yourself dragging your way to the last page, trying to finish a book while just wanting to read another one? Does the stack of books you've started just get taller and taller with no end in sight? Do you feel stuck having so many books you want to read and hating the books that are in your hands right now? Then you, my friend, need to learn to DNF. DNF is a handy acronym that stands for Did Not Finish. It's what we say in the booktube community when a book is just not doing it for us for whatever reason. And some people find it really hard to DNF. So in this video, I want to show you how I think about it and maybe help you take that step to not finishing a book just because you started it. Now look, if you like finishing every book that you start, if this is not a problem to you, then I'm not here to talk you out of it. Some people truly do like every book that they're picking up and get some sort of value out of it. And I'm not here to tell you how to read, or in this case, how not to read. But there are others who feel guilty for a number of reasons for not finishing a book. And if that's you, this video is where you should be. Now, I'm in the camp, life is short and reading should be enjoyable. And yes, every book on this stack here, including the ones that are on that shelf back behind that you can't see anymore, these are all books that are in my TBR, my to be read, my physical TBR that is. And this is not all of them. I love collecting books. I love having a bunch of books to pick from, but I also recognize that life is too short. It is not physically possible for one person to read every single book that has been published. So it's important in my mind not to finish books that I am not enjoying or that aren't right for me in the moment and that I don't have to finish. And so I'm going to walk you through how I think about whether or not to DNF a book. So I ask myself two primary questions. First, do I have to read this? If no, then do I want to read this? If no, stop reading it. Move on to the next thing. Oh, did you want more? Like more of a video? Okay, we can get into some details. All right, let's break this down into those two questions. Do I have to finish this? Do I want to finish this? And then we're gonna have a third question that I did not ask before, which is, why do I feel like I have to finish this? Assuming the answer to the first two questions is no. So, do I have to finish this? If you're saying, yes, I do have to finish this, then the question I would ask is, why? If you're getting money, or if you're getting a grade, so maybe you're being paid to review a book, or you are in a class and you have to write an essay or take a test on this book, yeah, you gotta read it. You gotta find a way. And even I, a lifelong reader, a lover of books from the very moment that I formed my first written words, even I've had trouble in the past, especially in school, pushing through a book that I know I have to finish, that I don't like, and yet here we are. I specifically remember Herman Melville's Billy Budd and a spring break during which it took me a literal week to read, how long is that thing? 50, 60 pages? That should have taken a day back when I had nothing else to do during a spring break, literally no responsibilities other than to read this story. It's not even a book, it's a novella, and write an essay on it. It was the most painful reading experience I have ever had. So for those who might be doubting, does Ms. Peepers really understand why I don't like reading? I do, I really, really do. And I've got to think that everyone who loves reading has experienced this at some point in the past. You've got to read these books, but here's some stuff that might help. One thing you could try is changing the format. If you're reading it physically, maybe try the audiobook or an e-reader. Sometimes a different format is just easier for your brain to process and move through. Especially with an audiobook, if you've got a good narrator, that can actually make the story move more quickly. At the very least, it's moving. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you could skim the boring bits. Now, if the whole book is boring bits, this isn't gonna help you. But sometimes I've found in books that I don't enjoy, especially a longer one, Billy Budd is the exception. I hated that book so much. If you liked Billy Budd, can you tell me why? Because I had a really hard time with it. And should I try it again now that I'm an adult? Most larger books will have something in there that you can get to, that you can latch onto, a good character, some storyline, even if it's not the main plot line, that you can connect to. And if you're writing a review, by the way, this is great feedback. I had a really hard time reading this book. Your review is gonna start to write itself. For school, that's more of a risk. You know your teacher better than I do. That's something I don't think I could have gotten away with in school. Maybe you can. Another idea, if you are in this with somebody else, get an accountability buddy. That's a good way for a lot of people to form habits or to get through a task that you just don't like. Giving yourself a reward at the end, something along those lines, that's really, really helpful. Especially if you're in a class, reading alongside with someone else who's in your class can help, especially if they're also struggling. Or if they're not, find out why they love this book, why they're enjoying it. That could help spark something for you. And then the last bit of advice, and this is, I'm going to need you to listen to the whole thing. In addition to reading the book, not instead of, try watching an adaptation if there is one. Adaptations take less time to watch, typically, than it takes to read the book. And so you can and they tend to cut out the boring bits. And so you can get the thread of the story. And sometimes that will help again with finding something about the story that you are interested in. Doesn't always work, but just remember, read the book too. Adaptations cut stuff out, they change things. Don't write your essay based on the adaptation, or you're not going to pass the fact checkers. It's going to be very clear that you didn't read it. A second reason that you might feel like you have to read a book is if you know the author. Now, for a book that's already been published, feedback is not going to help with this specific work. You have to think about your relationship with the person. If you're close to them, if you can say to them, look, this book just isn't my thing, doesn't mean it was bad, just not for me, that's fine. If you are not close to the person, find something supportive that you can say, even if it's just, you published, congratulations. I read it, good job. Try to sound a little less fake than me. But if the book's already been published, telling them you hated it is not gonna help them at all. And candidly, they're gonna have reviewers say, and people on Goodreads and whatever, there's always someone, no matter how good the book is, telling them they hated it. They don't need that negativity from you. And a smart person will not push you too hard if you're not offering up effusive feedback right away. Now, if you're in the situation of being a beta reader, and I'm a beta reader for someone right now, I am enjoying the book. It's just taking me a while to beta read because beta reading and actually giving feedback, which is constructive because the book hasn't been published yet, it is helpful to say, hey, this didn't make sense, or switch these scenes around, or this character is not working, or whatever. It takes a long time. But if you're beta reading for someone and you are bored, you need to tell that person because they can fix it before it gets published. So be open, be honest with that person. If they ask for your feedback when there's time to do something about it, then the kindest thing you can do in the long term is tell them the truth. If they didn't want the truth, you will soon find yourself not receiving chapters anymore. The third reason that someone might feel like they have to finish a book is that they made a commitment to someone. So this could be your buddy reading a book with someone, you're in a book club, and this is the book that someone chose. It could be the book you chose. In this case, I would just ask one question. Are the people to whom you have committed to read a book for fun, are they real friends? If they are, then you should be able to tell them, I couldn't do this. I have to get off this train. I can't do it. If they don't understand that, then they're probably not real friends, in which case, fuck them. Don't finish the book, move on. Be polite about it. Maybe this isn't the book club for you. Maybe this is someone you shouldn't be buddy reading with. Sometimes we learn these things the hard way. What are you gonna do? But for the most part, that's part of the discussion. I'm not enjoying this book and here's why. And then that becomes the buddy read or the book club discussion. Assuming with question 1, you've determined you don't have to read this book. Question 2 is, do I actually want to read this book? This can be a more complicated one because sometimes you're just not in a place to read a book at a particular time, but you do actually want to read it. So the question is, why do you want to read it? And I've got some examples of some books that I have DNF'd that I do actually want to read at some point. So the first one is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And the reason that I want to finish it, but couldn't at the time that I read it, is this book needs big brain energy. And when I picked up this book, I did not realize that. I can tell that it's really beautifully written. I think there's going to be a lot in here that I can connect to. This is a book about a woman who is essentially going through a midlife crisis. It's also written in stream of consciousness, and that's not easy to read. I mean, I'm sure it's not easy to write either. That is not easy to read. And I did not think that through when I picked this up 1 year, 2 years ago in November. So a thing about me, I love Christmas. Specifically, I love baking for Christmas. And I bake for the holidays. I bake for my husband's birthday, which is close to Thanksgiving. I just love baking. And we have family events and that kind of thing. We give gifts, we do all sorts of stuff. And it's also a busy time at work typically. I don't have a lot of spoons in the last few months of the year. This book is not what I needed. I did not need a big brain energy book at the end of last year, of any year. I don't need this at the end of any year. This is a book that I have soft DNF'd. So I've set it aside. I'm going to pick it up again. I kept it. If I'm not going to pick up a book again, I unhaul it. This I do want to pick up again. I'll probably start from the beginning. I mean, you can even see I tabbed a few things. So I found some quotes that I liked. This was not happening. So I set it down. And you can do that too. Another possibility is that you think that a future version of you will appreciate the book, which is a little bit different from big brain energy, which is something that I think is very specific. My example here is the book Dust by Hugh Howey. Now this is part of a trilogy. The Silo series, the Silo trilogy. I loved the first book of this trilogy, Wool. So good. Really just fantastic. I really liked, didn't love, but really liked Shift, the second book. I don't know what happened with Dust. I just kind of lost steam, but that doesn't mean that I won't pick it up again at some point, that I won't try again. Maybe I just shouldn't have read these three so close to each other, which is unusual for a series, but that's how it goes sometimes. Maybe you're just done sometimes. I also hate to break up a set, but I think at some point in the future, I may pick this up again and try it. So that's something that you should consider. Just take care not to plan for an aspirational future self. That is to say, one day I'll be mentally stable enough to appreciate this book, or happy enough to appreciate the happiness of these characters, or thin enough to know what this thin character is going through, whatever. Like, don't make it an aspirational version of yourself, because that way lies shame and frustration. Third option, I want or need the information that's in this book. This is often for nonfiction. You find a book that is about a topic that you want to know more about, or that you need to learn more about. Maybe it's something to do with your job, or something you want to get into, something you want to learn how to do. And with that, I would say there are almost no books that are the only book on a particular subject. They exist, I'm sure they exist, very, very niche things. But for the most part, you can find another book that does the same thing or talks about the same thing. It might come at it from a different angle. But I remember, for example, I read a book called Tiny Habits, which is downstairs, so I'll put the picture up here. There's also a book called Atomic Habits. And I think there's another one, maybe a few more, that all have the same general concept, which is if you want to start doing something different or change your habits, start with the tiniest component of it and gradually build on that. My point is not to say that either author was redundant or anything like that. I'm sure if I read both books, there would be differences and there would be nuances to them. But if you're not enjoying one version of a book or one book about a subject, chances are good you can find that information somewhere else. So give that a try. And if you keep striking out, searching for that information and just not enjoying the sources of that, it might be the subject, and that's okay too. And then the fourth reason that you want to continue to finish it could be that you feel like you should finish it. And this warrants another section entirely. And that is question 3. Do I feel like I should finish this book? Hey, look, it's Middlemarch. I haven't gotten very far in Middlemarch. I do want to give it more of a try. So I will do that. But I'm on page 38. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bored. I'm going to give it a couple more chapters. But right now it's like sitting on my nightstand. And I also have Redwall sitting on my nightstand. And Redwall is so much of an easier book to read than this. I'm almost done with that though, so I'm going to try this again. Hey, Sylvie. Here's Miss Sylvie. I'm going to give it another go. I'm going to give it maybe a couple more chapters, but I might DNF this. I'm thinking about it. But you know what's interesting is this is a classic. And a lot of times we are told what we should be reading is classics. And look, I love a classic. Don't get me wrong. I read Don Quixote. I haven't mentioned that in quite a few videos. Watch my video on how I read Don Quixote. But we are constantly being told what we should do, who we should be, what we should like. And the word should can be so toxic. So if you're thinking, oh, but I should read this, think about why. One of the reasons that I feel like I should read this is not because it's a classic. I read plenty of classics to know for myself that I'm not anti-classic. And I'm secure enough in my intellectualism that I don't feel like I have to prove that I'm smart enough to read a classic. This isn't even the biggest classic that I've read because I read Don Quixote. But anyway, I did, in my very first video, say that this was one of the books that I was going to read this year. And I've been saying I'm going to read it right here on this channel. So I feel like if I don't give it the good college try, that doesn't feel right. But I'm coming around to this concept that probably I might not finish it. There are 2 camps of books that you should read. Literature is one of them, classics. We talked about that. The other one is books that are popular. So there are a lot of popular books. And I'll tell you, I've never read a book by Emily Henry. Grasp your pearls. One, because I'm not a big reader of romance novels. I'm just not. It's not something that appeals to me most of the time. I read them on occasion, but it's not really my thing. And I've just never felt like it. I still haven't read Sarah J. Maas. I still haven't read Brandon Sanderson. There are some really big authors that I just have not read yet. Doesn't mean I never will, but there we are. I am not one to give into reading a book just because it's popular. If you watched my last video, you know that I just read Legends and Lattes, and how many years has that been? A really, really popular book, and it's up my alley, and I really liked it. But, you know, sometimes you just don't get to it. For me, reading and what books we choose should be a personal choice and not a status symbol. So if you're reading a classic just to prove that you're smart, or if you're reading a popular book just to prove that you're trendy, are you really reading for you at that point? I feel like at that point you're reading for other people. To be really, really clear, if I see someone reading a classic, I don't assume it's because they want to look smart. And if I see someone reading a popular book, I don't assume it's because they want to be trendy. Sometimes people choose their books, especially the ones that they read publicly, based on the image that they want to present. And especially on social media, that you're gonna see a lot of that. And by the way, you can change your mind about any of these things. You can hard DNF a book, get rid of it, say you never want to read it again, and then years later, come across a copy or someone gives it to you and then you're like, you know what, I'll give it another try, and you love it. It could happen. So none of this is meant to be set in stone. None of these decisions are final. If you make a big speech about how much you hate it, some people are probably going to call you on it, which is fair. That's to be expected. But come at it with, you know what? Yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong. There's nothing more disarming to people telling you you're wrong than agreeing with them. Yeah, I was wrong. Totally. You'd be amazed how quickly that shuts down people who are trying to shame you for being wrong. But anyway, that's a little life hack for you. So that is how I think about DNFing a book. There is no shame in it. And there's also no shame if you do finish every single book you pick up. Some people do. Some people get a lot of fulfillment out of it. If it is serving you, keep doing it. If you are feeling good about it, keep doing it. But if there is some layer of shame or regret or a feeling of time wasted or a painfully reading, trying to push your way through a book that just is not doing it for you, then consider stopping. You can always pick it up again at some point in the future if you change your mind. But you might find letting it go, you'll feel so much better. Tell me in the comments how you feel about DNFing. I will see you in the next video.